Everyone knows the BBC's big names, Pride and Prejudice, Downton Abbey, but there's another tier they don't advertise. The ones adapted from novels nobody reads anymore. The ones with jealous husbands unraveling over gossip, with con artists in Parliament, with Alan Rickman playing a chaplain so oily it makes your skin crawl. These dramas had top-tier writers, huge casts, and serious budgets, and still, somehow, almost no one's heard of them. If you're into Victorian melodrama but tired of the usual Austen rinse and repeat, He Knew He Was Right might be worth a look. It's based on the Anthony Trollope novel and adapted by Andrew Davies, who knows exactly how to pull these things off without turning them into syrup. This one's about a young man who starts out happily married and then slowly ruins everything with obsessive jealousy. His wife Emily is charming and sensible, but her godfather, Colonel Osborne, played with just the right amount of cheek by Bill Nighy, decides to pay her regular visits. Our protagonist loses his grip, and what starts as jealousy spirals into full-blown madness. But it's not just about the couple. The series crisscrosses through Victorian society like a well-oiled gossip mill. You've got subplots involving marriage, class, ambition, and a fair bit of scheming. There's a clergyman being fought over by two sisters, and a young woman trying to live her life, despite a suffocating aunt played by Anna Massey, who, as usual, nails it. The tone walks that line between dark and wry. The humor is subtle, the performances are sharp, and for once, the period language doesn't feel like it's trying too hard. The whole thing runs across 4-hour-long episodes, and it never overstays its welcome. Trollope doesn't get the same attention as Dickens, but he's got just as much bite when it comes to how people work, especially when it comes to pride, suspicion, and all the quiet little ways people ruin their own happiness. This series gets that tone exactly right, and Andrew Davies, who also did Moll Flanders and Vanity Fair, delivers one of his most psychologically sharp adaptations. Nothing showy, just solid, confident storytelling all the way through. This one's a different beast. Still Trollope, still Andrew Davies, but instead of drawing rooms and minor scandals, The Way We Live Now goes all in on finance, fraud, and high society hypocrisy. It's messy, sharp, and, for BBC, surprisingly bold. At the center is Augustus Melmotte, a ruthless financier trying to buy his way into English respectability. David Suchet plays him with this magnetic recklessness, and his big downfall, complete with a dramatic exit from Parliament, feels earned. There's also Shirley Henderson as his daughter Marie, tired of being treated like a walking dowry. She quietly steals every scene she's in without overplaying it. You've got Lady Carberry, a writer of fluff novels to keep her useless family afloat. Matthew Macfadyen plays her son Felix, who drinks, gambles, chases women, and contributes absolutely nothing. And then there's Cillian Murphy as Paul Montague, tangled up in a doomed love story with Hedda, Paloma Baez's character. Their relationship is one of the more grounded threads running through this parade of greedy fools and desperate social climbers. It's Trollope doing what he does best, pulling the curtain back on how money warps everything. The book is massive, dense, and full of side plots, so this adaptation condenses things quite a bit. But it still captures the energy. Even when it feels exaggerated, it never loses the thread. 4 75-minute episodes that hold up surprisingly well, especially if you've got a bit of patience for the pacing. This one's Dickens, not Trollope, but it fits right in. If you've seen Bleak House or Our Mutual Friend, you know what kind of scope Dickens can bring to a story. Little Dorrit has all that and more. Claire Foy, back before The Crown made her a household name, plays Amy Dorrit. Raised in Marshalsea Prison where her father's been locked up for years. She's kind, capable, and stronger than she looks. She meets Arthur Clenham, played by Matthew Macfadyen, who gets curious about her background and ends up getting pulled into a massive web of debt, corruption, and buried secrets. It's a story about money, class, and people stuck in systems that don't care whether they live or die. But it's also about tenderness, loyalty, and the few quiet ways people manage to do the right thing. Andrew Davies handled the adaptation, and it shows. He gets the pacing right, and the balance between warmth and cynicism is handled with care. Tom Courtenay plays Amy's father, exhausted, proud, and completely deluded in the way only Dickens' fathers can be. There's murder, romance, bankruptcy, and even a few laughs. The production design is top-notch, the cast is stacked, and the tone stays consistent all the way through. This one's not just underrated, it's one of the better Dickens adaptations BBC's ever done. Now this one is proper BBC Dickens. Our Mutual Friend is one of his darker novels, but also one of the most romantic, and this adaptation is absolutely top tier. It's directed by Julian Farino, and the story starts with a body pulled out of the Thames, classic grimy Dickens setup. And from there, it branches into a full-on maze of inheritance, social climbing, betrayal, and weird little bone collectors. Peter Vaughan plays Naughty Boffin, the guy who suddenly inherits a massive garbage empire and finds himself under a microscope from London's upper crust. Keely Hawes plays Lizzie Hexam, her dad's the one who found the body, and she ends up caught between a well-bred drip and a violent, obsessive schoolteacher played by David Morrissey, who is terrifyingly good in this. Meanwhile, you've got Bella Wilfer, played by Anna Friel, who starts out completely obsessed with money, gets adopted into high society by the Boffins, and slowly begins to change when she realizes the mysterious man sniffing around isn't just some boring bookkeeper. That's Stephen Mackintosh, and he plays it quiet but sharp. Then you've got Paul McGann, Timothy Spall, a couple of gold-digging lunatics who marry each other by mistake, and a literal bone merchant named Mr. Venus. The plot winds up and down every corner of Victorian London, between slums, drawing rooms, and garbage heaps, without ever losing steam. The pace is snappy, the cinematography looks like a proper feature film, and the whole thing has that rich, gloomy, candlelit look that only BBC can do right. Honestly, it's one of their best Dickens adaptations, and barely anyone talks about it. Next up is Madame Bovary from 2000. And look, this one is full-on misery and corsets, but in the best possible way. Frances O'Connor plays Emma Bovary, and she is unreal in this. This is the one where the dress budget must have been half the production cost because everything looks stunning, until it all falls apart, which it does, quite dramatically. Emma's stuck in rural Normandy in the 1830s, married to Charles, a sweet but dull little man played by Hugh Bonneville, who's so oblivious it almost becomes a joke. Emma, of course, wants more. She's reading romantic novels, dreaming of passion, excitement, anything besides wallpaper and church socials. And what does she do with all that disappointment? She acts out, gets tangled up with smug men like Greg Wise's Rodolphe, racks up debt, and gets in way over her head. What really sells this version is the casting. The supporting lineup is full of familiar BBC and ITV faces: Eileen Atkins, Keith Barron, Trevor Peacock, Jessica Oyelowo, Hugh Dancy when he still had baby cheeks. Every small part feels lived in, which keeps it from slipping into melodrama. The whole production just oozes that early 2000s BBC polish. It's serious but not stuffy, lush but not ridiculous, and it sticks closer to the book's tone than a lot of the flashier versions. This isn't the kind of drama that lifts you up. It drops you into the mud, makes you sit there, and lets you squirm, which is exactly what Madame Bovary should do. Martin Chuzzlewit is Dickens being at his most vicious. Everyone's a fraud, a liar, or a self-righteous buffoon, and this 1994 adaptation absolutely leans into it. The cast is stacked, the costumes are perfect, and it goes all in on Dickens's nastier side. Paul Scofield plays the elder Martin Chuzzlewit, a cranky old man with money and absolutely no patience for his awful, grasping relatives. Every one of them is trying to cozy up to him before he dies, and he sees straight through them. The younger Martin, his grandson, is played by Ben Walden, who starts out insufferably smug and gradually gets knocked down a few pegs when he's disowned for falling in love with Mary Graham, his grandfather's ward. But the real star of the show is Tom Wilkinson as Seth Pecksniff. He is spectacularly awful, greasy, pompous, manipulative, with a streak of lechery that makes your skin crawl. Philip Franks plays Tom Pinch, the nicest man alive, who somehow ends up in the orbit of these horrible people, and Keith Allen plays Jonas Chuzzlewit, who is just plain vile. There's murder, blackmail, inheritance schemes, and the kind of family drama that feels about one sherry away from a full-blown knife fight. The whole production has this wild energy, like everyone knew they were in a Dickens story and just decided to have fun with it. It's not gentle, It's not uplifting, but it is one of the most vividly acted and sharply written Dickens adaptations BBC ever made. This one doesn't get talked about enough, and frankly, it should. Middlemarch aired in 1994, and it might be one of the most grounded, grown-up adaptations the BBC ever pulled off. You've got a young doctor, Lydgate, played by Douglas Hodge, coming to Middlemarch with plans to open a new hospital. You've got Dorothea, played by Juliet Aubrey, full of big ideas and a desperate need to do something useful with her life. Both of them get swept up in marriages that pull them completely off course. What starts off as noble ambition gets swallowed up by daily disappointment, small-town pettiness, and slow-burn compromise. The cast is sharp all the way through. Doesn't matter if it's the leads or someone who barely had a line 2 episodes ago, everyone feels lived in. And that's mostly thanks to the script by Andrew Davies, who was on fire at the time. It's smart, layered, full of people who make terrible choices for understandable reasons. This is Eliot's story through and through. Morals tangled up with money, passion getting dragged down by practicality, and characters constantly running headfirst into the limits of their world. It's romantic, yes, but never sentimental. Rufus Sewell shows up, Patrick Malahide's here, being his usual unsettling self. It's as good as period drama gets. Now this one, Bleak House, is Dickens at full power. Legal chaos, endless inheritance drama, murder, romance, corruption. Honestly, it's a miracle they got it all to fit in a miniseries. Andrew Davies adapted this one too, and it moves. None of that slow, stagey Dickens people complain about. This thing hums along like a thriller. It's about the Court of Chancery, which is this never-ending legal maze where cases go to die. One of them's been going on for generations, dragging everyone into the mud with it. And yes, the story's enormous. There are subplots on top of subplots, but every thread leads somewhere, and it's held together by a cast that doesn't miss. Gillian Anderson is cold, perfect precision. Charles Dance is playing the kind of character he was born to play. You've also got Alan Armstrong, Carey Mulligan, Phil Davis, Richard Griffiths. The whole thing is just packed. It won a Peabody. It got 10 Emmy nominations. And somehow, it still flies under the radar when people talk about great Dickens adaptations. But this is one of the best ones out there, hands down. There's something weirdly addictive about Cranford. It's small-scale, quiet, and completely obsessed with day-to-day village life, but it pulls you right in. Set in the 1840s, this is about a town where nothing should happen, and yet everything does. A railway's creeping closer. Change is on the horizon, and the ladies of Cranford are trying, with varying degrees of success, to hold on to their way of life. Judi Dench is the anchor, playing Maddie Jenkins. Gentle, a little fluttery, but with a backbone when it counts. Eileen Atkins, Imelda Staunton, Julia Mackenzie, they're all in here, and they're all in top form. The charm of Cranford is in the details, the gossip, the social maneuvering, the little traditions everyone clings to while the world shifts around them. It's based on several Elizabeth Gaskell stories, and it manages to feel both cozy and quietly devastating. This one gets overlooked way too often. Everyone talks about Gwyneth Paltrow or Anya Taylor-Joy, but the 1972 Emma quietly outclasses most of them. Doran Godwin plays Emma with the exact balance of charm and meddling smugness that Austen wrote. She's not overly sweetened, not modernized, just delightfully insufferable in all the right ways. Debbie Bowen plays Harriet Smith, who gets dragged into Emma's matchmaking schemes, while Donald Eccles plays her wonderfully useless hypochondriac father. The only person with any sense in the room is John Carson's Mr. Knightley, who tries, constantly, to knock some realism into Emma's head. Being a 6-part series, it doesn't have to rush anything. You actually get to see Emma learn things the hard way, which is more than I can say for certain film versions. And for those who like their Austen adaptations with some bite, this one's a much better use of your time than the Paltrow version. Even Clueless feels sharper than that film did. The costumes here were designed by Joan Ellicott, who actually aimed for historical accuracy, not frilly nonsense or theatrical flourishes. She went straight for 1815, using color, pattern, and style to reflect class and personality. Emma gets the rich, regal look with sophisticated tones and even an ermine-lined cape. Harriet wears soft, youthful florals. And Mrs. Weston, true to her age and role, stays modest in somber colors. Yes, the videotape look can be harsh, and the fluorescent lighting makes everything seem more dated than it should, but underneath that is real craftsmanship. The designs were so good, they were reused in later BBC productions, including the 1979 Pride and Prejudice. This wasn't just one of the better Emmas, it was one of the most thoughtfully made. This one might look cozy on the surface, but it's not just tea and bonnets. Lark Rise to Candleford is full of sharp edges and emotional weight under all that period charm. It's set in the Oxfordshire countryside in the 1880s, split between two places. Lark Rise, a tiny hamlet clinging to the past, and Candleford, a market town charging into the future. Through the eyes of young Laura Timmins, we see how those two worlds pull her in different directions. She takes a job at the post office in Candleford, leaving behind everything familiar in Lark Rise, and she doesn't exactly get an easy time of it. The show doesn't overdo the drama, but it also doesn't sugarcoat things. Characters deal with poverty, class tension, grief, and change. Actual change, not just costume drama plot filler. And what helps is that you get time with them. The story stretches over multiple seasons, so nothing's rushed. The show captures a lot of what made Flora Thompson's original writing special, this quiet observation of village life just as it's starting to disappear. If you're someone who likes BBC period dramas with more than just pretty costumes, this one's worth the watch. The 2008 Tess of the D'Urbervilles adaptation is probably the most grounded, emotionally honest version the BBC ever made. And yes, that includes the Justine Waddell one from 10 years earlier. Gemma Arterton plays Tess without any varnish. She's not tragic for the sake of it. And she's not simplified. You feel every inch of her rise and fall, her hope, her bad luck, and the horrible decisions forced on her by everyone around her. Eddie Redmayne plays Angel Clare with that annoying, heroic confidence that turns spineless exactly when it matters. And Hans Matheson's Alec is just vile. There's no attempt to romanticize or soften anything here. This version sticks close to Hardy's story. There's no need to update it or push any weird modern messaging into it. It lets the story speak for itself. And what that story shows is how Tess is punished over and over again for things that weren't her fault. She's caught in a world where reputation matters more than truth, and every man around her is either weak or predatory. The show doesn't lean too hard on the sexual politics either. It focuses more on how Tess's luck turns on a dime, how quickly her life can go from hopeful to ruined. And the pacing actually works. It moves fast enough to hold your attention, but gives the big emotional moments time to breathe. It was filmed all across the West Country: Wiltshire, Somerset, Gloucestershire, and Dorset. Lots of scenes were shot outdoors, which keeps the whole thing feeling fresh and natural. They even shot on 35mm film, so the landscapes look stunning without feeling overly polished or fake. This one starts quiet. A slow legal dispute. A clergyman caught in the crossfire. But give it a couple episodes, and then it takes off. Donald Pleasance plays Reverend Septimus Harding, a mild, decent man who just wants to do his job in peace. But when a young surgeon, played with all the righteous energy of a man about to ruin someone's life, accuses him of financial misconduct, everything unravels. And it turns out that same surgeon is in love with Harding's daughter. At first, it plays like a dignified little church drama. Then Clive Swift shows up as the new bishop. His wife, played by Geraldine McEwen, arrives and immediately starts stirring the pot. Alan Rickman, barely known at this point, steps in as their chaplain and turns ambition into something downright venomous. Once the new regime takes hold, it turns into a small-scale war. Quiet backstabbing, petty politics, and full-blown chaos, all over the tiniest scraps of church power. Rickman is magnetic. McEwen is terrifying. Nigel Hawthorne looks like he's going to drop dead from pure indignation at any moment. And through all of it, Pleasance keeps the whole thing grounded. Somehow, he makes goodness not just bearable, but interesting. That's no small feat. based on 2 novels by Anthony Trollope. And set in 1855 Salisbury, the Barchester Chronicles is 7 episodes of sharp writing, biting performances, and some of the best ensemble work the BBC ever pulled off. If you've read any Thomas Hardy, you already know, this one's not going to end with a group hug. Alan Bates plays Michael Henchard, and right from the start, he's a disaster. First episode, he gets drunk and sells his wife and child at a country fair. The next morning, full of guilt, he swears off drinking for 21 years. That'll fix it. Cut to 18 years later, he's cleaned up, become the mayor of Casterbridge, and then his past comes back. His wife and daughter track him down, and from there, the whole thing spirals. It's about pride, shame, bad decisions made worse by worse cover-ups. Bates plays it big, messy, flawed, but never boring. Anna Massey is superb as one of his old flames, trying to find something real in the middle of all his nonsense. The script, adapted by Dennis Potter, doesn't soften anything. Henchard's not a noble fallen hero. He's emotionally clumsy, and that clumsiness wrecks everything he touches. It's uncomfortable to watch, but it's honest. 7 episodes, just under 6 hours. It's not fast-paced, but once it gets moving, it pulls you in and doesn't let up. This one's lighter, but it earns its spot. A 12-part adaptation of Dickens' first novel, and maybe his funniest. It follows Samuel Pickwick and his 3 companions from the Pickwick Club as they travel the English countryside, documenting life and human nature, which basically means they bumble into one ridiculous situation after another. There are fights, misunderstandings, courtroom disasters, shady lodgings, and some of the worst travel planning ever committed to screen. The whole thing's full of slapstick, and the tone stays light but never stupid. Each episode's about 30 minutes, and the narration frames it all like a travel diary. It's charming without being cutesy, and it really nails that nostalgic feel for pre-railroad England, back when people were still rattling around in stagecoaches, and roads meant something. Set between 1827 and 1831, this one captures the exact moment when that whole world was fading away. And Dickens, even back then, was already a little bit nostalgic for it. This is Anne Bronte's answer to every smug man who thought marriage was a permanent contract with no escape clause. The setup's simple. A woman shows up at a half-ruined country house with her young son, clearly running from something. And instead of minding their own business, the neighbors start whispering. She's too private, too independent, and clearly doesn't know her place. Only one of them, a local farmer named Gilbert Markham, takes the time to see there's more going on. The story's Victorian on the surface, but it flashes back to the Georgian era, showing the years 1821 to 1830, before circling back to 1847. It's moody, it's bold, and it doesn't flinch away from the reality of what women like Helen had to endure. Tara Fitzgerald plays Helen with exactly the right mix of control and steel. Toby Stephens brings that sharp, tightly wound energy he always does, and Rupert Graves rounds out the cast. It's not a flashy production, but it's grounded, and that's what makes it work. BBC's Vanity Fair doesn't soften anything. Becky Sharp is manipulative, shameless, and completely irresistible, and this adaptation actually leans into that instead of trying to redeem her. Natasha Little plays Becky like she knows she's the smartest person in the room, and she's probably right. She charms, seduces, and outsmarts everyone she meets. She's not tragic, she's not misunderstood, she's just better at the game than they are. Andrew Davies wrote the script, and if you've seen his Pride and Prejudice, you know he knows what he's doing. He gives the dialogue bite, and every scene feels like it's moving somewhere, which is important because Vanity Fair isn't short on characters. You've got Nathaniel Parker channeling full Rhett Butler energy as Rawdon Crawley. Jeremy Swift plays Joss Sedley with just the right amount of smug self-satisfaction. Frances Gray is perfectly irritating as Amelia, and Philip Glenister as Dobbin is, well, long-suffering, as usual. They filmed in England, France, Wales, Germany. So visually, it's doing the work. The costumes are pure 19th century eye candy, though some viewers might find the music just a touch too modern. Murray Gold went for a slightly cheeky tone that doesn't always match what's on screen. But overall, it's a stylish production that doesn't pretend to make Becky someone she's not. 4 parts. Andrew Davies script. Elizabeth Gaskell's source material. Set in the 1830s, so just brushing the end of the Georgian era before Victorian England really kicks in. And a cast that actually fits the characters for once. Wives and Daughters starts off as a quiet little domestic story in a small English town, and then slowly expands into something much bigger. There's romance, scandal, secrets. It's Gaskell, after all, but it's also subtle. It's about people pretending to be polite while quietly destroying each other over tea. Molly Gibson is the heart of the story. An ordinary girl, smart enough to see through everyone's nonsense, but too well-behaved to say anything out loud. The people around her are either endlessly dramatic or so tight-lipped they practically vibrate from the effort. What's interesting is that Gaskell died before finishing the book. She clearly meant for things to end well, but it was left hanging. So Andrew Davies had to write an ending himself, and he pulled it off without making it feel tacked on. It actually fits, which is harder than it sounds. Producer Sue Birtwistle said the story is about the ordinary mysteries of life. And that's exactly what it is. It doesn't need murders or sweeping wars. It's about how love shows up, how it goes wrong, and how people try to make sense of it.